Thank you very much. And the floor is open for questions, I guess.
Thank you again for your presentations, and my question goes to Mr. Lalic, because while working here in the archives on the Video Nedeljnik collection, I often saw your face, and I know that you participated in producing that program. And I would like you to maybe assess the importance from this distance of those kinds of programs in, again, euphemism, democratic changes in Serbia at that times, and whether you see some traces of that kind of, we can call it opposition, in contemporary Serbia or maybe even the region, if you know something about that. Thank you.
I apologize in advance. My English is not fluent, so please, if you ask me something, please do it slowly and loudly. I don't know. It's a question about opposition in Serbia and
about oppositional programs, something that might be similar to Video Nedeljnik in 1996 or 1997 or that period.
Archive that we are going to use, and we use is almost all archive relied on prime times news or radio television Serbia in this period, and nothing else probably, you know. If you, I don't know, because it was the main archive. In the beginning of 91 and 92, it was the worst period concerning war propaganda, abuse of media. So it was one part of our how to say activities, you know, because we have been starting to make documentaries for 25 years at least, and we made, except those concerning abuse of media and against censorship, we made also the documentaries concerning the other topics like social, for example, terrorism, and etc. And we also made documentary art films just for festivals, so, and TV serials certainly, and so on and so on. You can see our everything in our site, archital.w.
Yes, thank you all for presentations. I just want to say one thing, that by focusing on this dominant nationalist perspective, we kind of undermined and excluded a lot of what was published and shown also on TV by people like Lazar Lalic, by Blazar Stojanovic, by many documentaries which were done and which had specific impact, I would say, and also Sense and Birn reporting, which was not included in this dominant way of reporting, but was accessible and people could see it. So yes, we probably should find a way to include, when we speak about this, to include also those voices, because without them we are really missing the whole picture, and it is very important. And unfortunately I did that today, and yes, most of the time that is how we do it, so yes, I apologize for all of us. Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to add on the same note, but perhaps that is something that we can discuss at the workshop. Since we are talking about the long-term effects of propaganda, it reminds us of the importance of putting, I'm sorry, the effects of the ideological effects or the consequences of media work in context. I just want to remind us all that throughout the 90s, most of the countries that we're dealing with, but I will specifically refer to Serbia now, were subject to a strict media control, and it was growing through the decade. And finally, when the regime completed the control, when the country ceased to see any of the alternative media, when it was put into a communication embargo, the regime fell. So when the control of the media was completed, the regime became very unsuccessful. There are other ways of communicating this content in the country, and there are other consequences of this media control. Also, media discourses are a complex phenomenon. Following one stream, which is the dominant ideological, hegemonic discourse, whatever you call it, is not the whole picture and requires to put it into a context. So I think we should just have this in mind and discuss it during the workshop, because it is requiring a particular approach to this material that we're discussing or are lucky to have at our disposal here, and to our reading of the media messages from a particular period. Thank you.
Thank you all. My question is for Nijara. I really enjoyed your presentation and everybody else's. So I wanted to know what, with your experiences in Republika Srpska during this particular time and in the subject that you're working on, what will be will you have articles or how are you going to produce these conversations? Will that be in the form of an art performance or a book or something? So I'm really curious to where this goes in the future, because it's an important conversation and dialogue.
Thank you. I'm a journalist, so some of the things that I said I already published in different articles. I wrote even in local media, even internationally. After this Karadzic judgment, I wrote for Al Jazeera English blog that you can find, and a little bit before that, I published a story about life in Prijedor today for the New Yorker, and I am trying to work on a book, to put it in that way. Since I started traveling out of Sarajevo siege immediately in February 1996. First time I went to Srebrenica, it was 1997. And since then, as a journalist, I'm traveling around the country, trying to spend as much time as I can outside of Sarajevo. Going especially to villages, because in Bosnian media, the life outside of Sarajevo and big cities are very often completely ignored, as well as the stories that are about real life in these cities. So even now, if you read Bosnian media, but also many regional media, unfortunately, even the international media, what they write is, it looks sometimes, even if you read, like, I don't know, Guardian or any newspaper outside, sometimes it looks like we are living in a gated communities, and that we don't even touch or see each other. That is completely wrong. It's definitely doesn't. Bosnia does not look like that. Bosnian politicians and the media they control, and that's almost all of the media in Bosnia and Herzegovina, do want everybody to believe in that. Unfortunately, my international colleagues and journalists are too lazy to even try to give a different picture of Bosnia. We don't hate each other. No, we don't. But politicians and the media do want us to believe that we do hate each other. And sometimes we are afraid to break this wall of hatred and to come out of it and to start really open, like why people in Banja Luka did not want to talk with me, because they're afraid of how to make this first step. And that's really big issue. And I'm like living with that for many years. And as I told you, I'm traveling around Bosnia for a very long time as a journalist. I don't have a problem. I mean, if you go in any part of Bosnia, my name is Nijara Ahmetašević. For many people in Bosnia, they will easily put me in one of the three groups, even though I like publicly always, even as now, I do not belong to one of the three groups in Bosnia, but they will easily put me in one of these three groups. I'm not afraid. People do speak with me. People are open. People are nice. People are not nationalist. They're just afraid. So that's something that I'm trying to write. That's something I'm trying to write in my articles. And that's something I hope that I will be able to soon start putting into something that could be a book. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a small question about I wonder how young people and social media relates to all this. So are those people who were born afterwards or were just small children during these tragic events, are they like somewhat, one would suppose some of them are sort of somewhat unconscious victims of all these things and all the hate discourse, but one could assume that perhaps some would say that this is past. I want to live my life now and don't bother me with those old things too much. And some may use social media perhaps creatively to translate it perhaps from the TV images for short videos. And so what's the connection with them? If you can talk a little more about that.
Every year for the last 5 years, I teach the summer school organized in Sarajevo by Youth Human Rights Initiative. And I have a chance to speak with very young people, most of them born after the war. And I speak with them about a past and what does a war means for them, and we are trying to talk about the importance of the process of facing with the past. And usually I start with one question, and that is, do they feel the war in Bosnia is over? And for 5 years, every time, almost in one voice, these kids answer to me, no, the war is still going on. And they don't feel, and I don't feel, the war is over. Nobody is shooting, even though in Sarajevo shootings are very, almost on a daily basis. We have that, but it's not a war, it's something else. It's a criminal that we have now. It's a very problem. But we don't feel the war is over because the media and local politicians, they don't want to let us feel like that. They still, as I said, and as previous speakers also told, they still speak almost in the same way like they used to speak during the war. They use the same terms. They still talk about us and them. And that's really hard. And the young people, they are trying to fight. I can give you an example, and I can give you a story from Prijedor, where a group of really young people using the social media and using art in order to kind of open a dialogue among communities in Prijedor and to talk about what did happen. That fighting against the war, that they are fighting, that they are trying to stop the war finally. And I think that they achieved something every year. They have, at the 31st of May, they have a day of the white armbands. And on that day, 5 years ago, only one person was standing, one young person was standing alone in the main square in Prijedor with a white armband and trying to find somebody who will be willing to talk with him. It's Emir Hodžić, about what did happen during the war in that city. Year after, 10 people were with him, very young people from Prijedor mostly, were with Emir standing on the streets with a white armband. Last year, it was more than 1,000 people, many of them Serbs from Prijedor, many of them people from Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia, and like everywhere around the region. So from this small city where the huge crime happened, where genocide was committed, even though ICTY still did not recognize that, young people using social networks mostly, because no media in Bosnia wants to write about them, and using art are trying to stop the war. So we will see how, but young people do try to move and do try to end this nightmare that we are still living.
I think we can take one more question, or yeah. Yes, please go ahead. Take the advantage of being the panel leader.
This is when I am going, yes, to abuse my position. And this is a question to Sven. Well, first a remark, I know at least, you like mentioned that the expression Domovinski rat was invented was a spin.
By USSR. It's how they call the Second World War.
Yeah,
the
I
big
remember that.
Homeland War.
Yeah, but in Croatia, that it was like a government spin. So
it was used by Tudjman as a thing that supports unity and has this imaginable homeland, which can also sometimes be Bosnia, but sometimes it can be only Croatia. And
I just wanted to remark that I know at least one journalist who claims that she invented the expression Domovinski rat.
There are lots of people that invented lots of things,
So it's. But
we don't know when the war even started. So let's talk first about that.
Yeah, and this is exactly something that I would want to ask. That you said that in the propaganda of the government, the war was presented as an aggression against Croatia, whether civil war or international aggression. I think it's also legal questions. It's not very easy to decide. And also up until the end of 91 or the siege of Vukovar or the fall of Vukovar, it's pretty hard to deny that this is what exactly happened. So there was an aggression against Croatia. I mean, how else you call the fact that 1/3 of your country is ripped off? My question points at is how this terminology could not change in 93 when Croatia committed exactly the same acts against Bosnia, Herzegovina, and how could they keep up the status of the victim when they were clearly the aggressors?
Yeah, few ways. First of all, clear manipulation and using clear manipulation and lies. One of the videos that I wanted to show, it's a very short one, where a reporter goes to Heliodrome. A lot of you people know what Heliodrome was, and says that people there, that this is not a concentration camp, that this is just a sort of the camp that even the prisoners like, because it's maybe not the cozy, but it's secure. So this was the first, and you can find it on YouTube, and I'll help you with that. And this reporter is still done until a few years later. She was a known reporter and a successful manager in media sector, along with some corruptive activities. And also, not only by using lies, but also by putting some interpretations that are very murky. Kind of, for example, Croatia in its constitution has the obligation to help the Croats living outside Croatia. So this means we can help the war in Bosnia because we think that Croats there are endangered first by Serbs and then by Bosniaks, and both Bosniaks and Serbs, and that's why we help them. This is not an aggression, but we are just helping them to preserve, to stay alive. So there were interpretations of the international humanitarian law that you can enter the other state of 40 kilometers, if I'm not mistaken, in defense of your country. But for example, Croatian troops in Vitez, that's a lot more than 40 kilometers from the border. So they were clearly using the ways to kind of weasel out of that situation, and even Croatia was faced. It was faced kind of like an embargo, like Serbia had. It was under threat of embargo in 93 and 94. And this is the reason why in '94 they finally decided to sign the agreement with the Bosniak side, with the federation, because they see, okay, not only that we won't get the part of Herzegovina and Bosnia, but we're going to be sealed off from the rest of the world. So let's go with the plan B. So let's go against the Serbs, and this will also help us to win the war in Croatia. So these were mostly the ways how it was tried to interpret Croatia's presence in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But until today, the official politics, of course, they denied to their graves. And even in the declaration of the Homeland War, as I said, it says that it was clearly a defensive war and not in any way connected to war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's very interesting when you know something is not, then, you're kind of become suspicious. If you're like saying, I'm not this, then I'm always trying to think, okay, maybe I'll check that. So.
Thank you very much. And the last question.
Is there a last question? Or we can save it for the workshop? Yeah.
Okay, then thank you very much for your attention. And I recall a sentence from Gospodin Lalic's presentation when he was talking about the personal responsibility of journalists in this very difficult situation, that there were worse times than that. And on this the happiest note possible, let me just close the conference.